Welcome to another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences, Inc. I am Dr. Bill Kanasky, here with my very good friend, and this is a repeat guest. I starting to have repeat guests, kind of like Johnny Carson's show when you had like the repeat guests, right? Only the good ones come back. Mr. Tim Christ from Texas. How you doing, Tim?
I'm good, Bill. Appreciate you having me back. Although I would say it's probably more like I'm just like a bad pity, right? I keep turning up.
No. We only have the good ones. We only have the good ones back on. But it's very timely because since you've been on the first, a lot's changed. I mean, things are changing by the week, if not by the day. Tim, start by telling me about Claimatic. Tell me about the company. Tell me what you guys focus on, and really what your main push is right now.
Sure. So Climatic is still an insurtech startup software company.
Okay.
We were actually born out of an independent adjusting firm. So when you think about an IA firm, their big issue, or one of their big issues, is when a cat hits, like Hurricane Harvey to Houston, they get 4,000 claims from like a USA or Allstate or whoever, and they've got to immediately grab all those claims and assign them to people in the field. And so there's just a lot of logistical nightmares to that. And so part of the secret sauce that our architect built was an algorithm that takes all the decisions that you make when you have to do all that. So you think about, oh, hey, Tim and Bill are licensed in Texas. Tim and Bill are flood certified or wind certified. Tim and Bill have a certain amount of estimating authority. Tim and Bill's physical location is whatever it is, right? Because of our GPS on our phones. Tim and Bill have been assigned 25 claims already this week, or they haven't been assigned any, or whatever their thresholds are. And is one of them going on PTO next week, or are they going to be working, that kind of thing. So there's a couple of dozen questions that you ask from a management perspective of who can I assign claims to, and so simply built an algorithm that takes all that into consideration. And so, of course, when the IA firm showed it to one of their carrier clients, the carrier said, "Hey, I like that little piece of technology. Can I have it?" So that was the genesis of how Climatic was born. And so we're in play with a number of carriers these days. Hippo Insurance is a very public client of ours, and they've said that our tool has been amazing. It's helped them, dramatically reduce their time at FNOL, which is first notice of loss, when people are calling in and providing information. Helps better get their adjusters assigned more quickly, and then helps with a lot of downstream effects as well. So when you think about it from a customer experience perspective, it's really frictional. If you call in, talk to a call center, then you get a phone call from Bill, and then 3 days later get a phone call from Tim, and Tim says, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Bill's not going to work the file anymore. He's too busy. I've got to take over." So you can assign the right resource the first time. It's just a better customer experience, and there's less overhead and less waste and things of that nature. So helping insurance companies speed up their claims process is what we're hyper focused on doing. Providing better customer experience, lowering operational costs, improving profitability, all those important things in business, right?
Very exciting stuff. Now, do me a favor. Walk us through what I'll call the evolution of the claims process. Tell me where it was. Tell me where it's at right now, and tell me where is this train going?
No, that's a good question. So 20 years ago, I got on State Farm's vendor list for firework. And they said, "Tim, you're going to get every 8th claim because we have a round robin claim assignment process." And so an insured would call in, say I had a fire. They would talk to the call center. The call center would send it over to the claim department. The claim department would assign it out to whichever team lead that would have it. And then that team lead would say, "Okay, well, this is a San Antonio claim, so it's got to go to my San Antonio manager." Then the San Antonio manager would say, "Okay, well, this is out in Fair Oaks, which is Northwest, which is kind of, John's territory. And let's make sure that John's got enough capacity, or if he hasn't been overloaded, then I've got to assign Susie." And it was a very, very manual process 20 years ago to kind of do all this. And fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of carriers, still do a lot of that same process today. So it has improved to some extent, but it definitely hasn't improved a whole lot. What we've seen, with claims in general, is there's now an increased focus on digitizing the claim experience. So at least going to a paperless environment, right? Obviously, we've been in COVID now for the last year. So it used to be that, the claim department would have 25 or 2,500 people in it, but now everybody's got to work remote. And so most people have been able to do that with, some level of interruption to their normal workflow. But but the other thing with COVID, it hasn't explained to us yet, is we've been in a severely depressed claim frequency environment, except for the cat storms we've had. So we've had an artificially low number of claims we've had to manage. So I don't think we've got a true measure of, can we be efficient in a work from home environment yet, because we haven't seen a normal volume. So I think that still has yet to play out. And frankly, I think it's not going to matter, because I think we're going to probably end up back in the office before, obviously before claim counts come back to normal anyway. But so that's kind of where we were, very manual, the adjuster was really the central person in that claims process. He was the guy that basically took all the disparate data. He was physically inputting the data into whatever claim system they use, and then managing that process through, and then pulling in additional resources as needed. It's gotten a little bit better with some technology. So now, you can get on your app and file a claim. You don't actually have to fax in a notice or things of that nature, right? I mean, but there's still some challenges at the front end of that. And on the back side of that, there's still people that want to issue paper checks, or, hey, if you've got a mortgage on your house and they issue you a check, it's endorsed to your mortgage company as well, which means you get your check in the mail, then you have to mail it to your mortgage company to endorse it. Then they mail it back to you. And so there's, still some very manual processes at play there. Where I think it's going, and I talk about this a lot in a presentation I've been giving around the country to a bunch of CPCU chapters, is, the insurance companies are starting to understand that when you have a claim experience, you have really two options as a result of that claim experience. If you have a good claim experience, you stay a customer and you become much more valuable to that carrier, because now you're stickier.
Yeah.
But it's about a 50-50 shot. The other 50% is they don't like the experience and they leave. So what they're starting to focus in on is, okay, so if we can improve claim experience, we can reduce policy churn, we can improve, customer NPS scores, we can improve the stories that, result in the neighborhood grapevine effect of how we treat people. And so part of that is with technology, because it's really, for a variety of regulatory reasons, the insurance companies have developed a claim process that complies with all the regulatory requirements. But when you have a claim, like I had a claim, we had a water softener burst in our garage. So we came home, there's water running out of our garage. So of course, me, the forensic engineer guy, goes, okay, I'm going to figure out what broke, right? And it ended up being a little PVC fitting that had fractured and burst, which is why the water was running everywhere. But the garage was the adjacent room to our baby's room. So my wife is dealing with the whole emotional piece of it, right? So, oh my God, the baby's carpet is wet and the sheetrock's all damaged and we got to cut it all out and everything.
Mold.
So, so that was just, but, so what happens is we got home, we had that claim. Well, I've now signed as an insured, I've signed up for a 16-step process, at least 16 steps, if not more, to now manage to get my house back together that I had never even knew existed. And by the way, I now actually know really, really well what my policy covers and doesn't cover. And I recognize that, that 1% deductible, which just people talk about on the front end, is actually $3,000 or $4,000 out of my own pocket in order to, order to actually cover the loss. Thankfully, in my case, because it was a fractured fitting, there was a subrogation opportunity. So we actually got the plumber who had installed the system about 3 weeks prior to agree that it was their fault. And so it was covered under their CGL policy. So I didn't have a dollar out of pocket. But had I not been proactive in sweeping up the water and gathering up all those pieces of plastic that had burst everywhere, we'd never have known, right? And so that's what happens on a day-to-day basis. And so I think where we're going is we're going to start to leverage technology to better manage that experience, because there's certain things, like if I call in the insurance company, you should know my policy number, you should know my phone number, you should be able to say, hi Tim, how are you doing today, and not have to make me go through a 17 question identification process.
I hate that.
And then you should be able to counsel me on whatever information I need to know, right? And so you've got to provide the right data at the right point in time to these folks, and also be able to just keep us apprised of things. I mean, you and I've been text messaging for what, 15, 16 years now. Insurance companies have just now in the last 2 or 3 years been able to text message with people.
Oh, wow.
So it's basic stuff, right? And like I said, we're still issuing paper checks. And I can get on Venmo and pay anybody in the world, in 3 minutes, but it takes 15 days for a check to get mailed from my insurance company. So it's just a lot of that basic digitization process that they're trying to improve on. But then you also start to figure out, well, there's areas where you can actually really delight your customer. Like, Lemonade is a great example. So if you have a renter's policy and somebody breaks into your apartment, steals your TV, you can get on your app, file a claim, take a picture of where the TV was. It shows the wires hanging out, like somebody ripped the TV off the wall. And as long as, as long as basically you check that you're a low fraud risk and you don't have any issues with your credit or, some other things that they obviously check in the background, the algorithm processes it and you get a check in 3 seconds or a direct payment in, 3 seconds for $300 for your TV or whatever it is. So that's frictionless, right? And that's from an insurance perspective, that's a really great experience. And so insurance companies are really looking at what they call touchless claims is really the way, that's the holy grail. That's where they'd like to get to is if we can engineer out fraud risk at the beginning, we can straight through pay claims. But the problem we have is, you get involved in these nuclear verdicts and juries and whatnot.
Yeah. The
problem we have is when we have disputes over the amount of loss or even causation or other issues, then it gets murky, and then we don't have the opportunity to create a straight through process, right? So we've still got to have other manners in which we can adjudicate a claim, but we're gonna bucketize everything going forward. We're gonna say, okay, this group of claims, which are very, very common, very, very simple, we're gonna straight through process. These bucket claims are complex; they're still gonna have to go through a traditional process, but we're gonna figure out little slivers of those that we can do faster to compress the timeline. Because even for litigation, if I can pay somebody for a claim, even if I can pay a claimant for a claim in 10 days, the likelihood of them going to litigation because they're now screwing around with me for 6 months is greatly reduced, right? So then I save all of that legal expense on the back end. So anything that I can do to compress the time frame is game on. And we recognize we're starting to do ROI calculations where what is the cost per hour of that claim? Yeah. And so I'm actually willing to overpay people in certain cases just to make it go away because I recognize the net benefit on the savings net. And so we're starting to, as opposed to it used to be, we didn't want to pay more than what we owed, right? But we're starting to realize the business impact long-term of that. And we're starting to factor that into our discussions.
That's incredible and actually very wise because I think for the most part, the insurance industry has been really slow to come around on that, meaning maybe investing and paying money early to save money on the back end. That's a concept that they've struggled with for a long time. And I think it's more probably psychological in nature of if I spend money up front, like I'm doing something wrong. But when you zoom out, you look at the big picture, oftentimes it's the best decision in the long run, right?
Yeah, well, I think there's a cultural aspect of it, but there's also a regulatory piece too, right? So that's where the part you can't get away from on the carrier side. But absolutely, you need to look at the big picture. But even historically, underwriting and claims really haven't ever talked to each other. So even basic stuff like getting 100,000 data points of the claims that you processed last year and being able to give that back to your underwriting department to say, here's the 80-20 rule, right? Here's the 20% of the claims that resulted in 80% of the payments. And if we'd have done XYZ differently, we would have saved 25% or whatever the number is. Even basic stuff like that hasn't happened a lot. And so we're just now getting, obviously with cloud technology and big data availability, we're just now starting to get to the point where you can accumulate all those disparate data points together. But, I'll give you the example. So my firm, we were in a totally serverless environment, right? We were virtualized from 2005 on. So we had 4 physical servers, 2 in Chicago, 2 in Columbus that were, one was primary and one was the rollover, right? And so if Columbus or Chicago lost power, we rolled over to Columbus and vice versa.
Yeah.
But none of the other servers existed. They were all in the cloud. Well, that was 2005. Well, insurance companies, the major claims management platform that exists today has just now released their cloud version in 2020. So they're 15 years behind on adopting cloud technologies and ability and flexibility, if you will, versus a lot of us in private business that, like I said, we've been doing for well over a decade. So you can imagine, because technology continues to evolve and increase in velocity, if we're 15 years behind on that, what are we also now missing out on? And text messaging is just another very simple example.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. They've been late to the party, if you know what I mean. So with more technology, seems like a lot of efficiencies and hopefully cost savings. What do you think the risks are? Because I think with any technology, there's going to be positives, but then sometimes you create new problems. I mean, is it like cybersecurity, things like that?
Yeah, yeah, there's a number of concerns, right? I mean, CNA just got hacked here in the last month, right? And that was a huge issue that's still probably, frankly, going on. The other concern you have is, anytime you adopt a cool new piece of tech, if there's any aspect of it that has a direct impact to your client, like you've got to be very, very careful with how that gets rolled out, right? Because if it's negative or frictional or whatever for any reason, I mean, you can immediately lose 10, 15, 20% of your business. I mean, we've got a client that they had a technical challenge last year with COVID. And so they were sort of offline for a month and a half, but they literally lost 25.5% of their business.
Wow.
Because of that, right?
Ouch.
Yeah, no, I mean, so that just, that's direct bottom line profitability and everything else, right? So it's just there's a lot of care and consideration and strategic discussions that got to go on related to tech rollouts. But yeah, cybersecurity is a big issue. From a regulatory perspective, is it even allowed? I mean, there's a lot of things going on regulatory wise. I mean, the Washington Insurance Commissioner has now said that we're not going to allow credit scores for rating purposes. And so that's, got the whole, industry up in arms. Telematics is able to be used everywhere except for California and Florida, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
So we've still got some, some inconsistencies there. So there, and then, when we talk about IoT and the commercial application, I'd actually written an article about this a few weeks ago for PC360, because there's an anti-rebating clause. There's a concern that, well, we can't induce an insured to give them a piece of, equipment that's going to help save them money, because that's an inducement to purchase coverage. So that's not allowed under the law. But how can we functionally allow an insured to use this device that's going to reduce the frequency and severity of their losses, and also, frankly, save us money at the end of the day, right? So it's a win-win. But we haven't figured out the right mechanism in which that process can be managed in order to help them, initiate that process. It doesn't really exist on the home personal side, because Hippo Insurance is a great example. If you sign up with Hippo, they send you a little smart home kit. So you install those little sensors, one on your front door, one on your back door, the smoke sensor in the kitchen, and then a water softener or a water sensor by your washing machine and by your water heater. And so it tells you whether your doors are locked or open or shut. It tells you whether there's smoke in the kitchen. It tells you whether there's any water on the floor. And so basically it's simply an early warning device. But Hippo will tell you, you'll get a 25% discount over a typical policy by just using their equipment. And so when you think about that across the spectrum, I mean, basic stuff, if we can have, security, protocols in place, like with the Ring doorbells and whatnot that almost everybody has, between theft or break-in, if we can have fire risk reduced, if we can have water mitigation taken care of. I mean, our home, the local utility actually reads our meter 4 times an hour. It's all digital and cloud enabled. And so I've got a dashboard I can look at and see exactly what my water usage is on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly basis. And so I can see it across the pattern, right? So I see, Wednesday through Monday, it's pretty static. It's 250 gallons or less. But on Tuesdays, which is when we're allowed to water, it spikes up to 900 gallons or whatever. But whenever it varies from that, I obviously then I would have a leak, right? So I've already set threshold triggers where if it exceeds a certain amount in a particular time frame, then I get a notification. And so all of those things, exist to help the fact that we're, likely it will reduce a loss in the event that there's one. And so when you think about that downstream, well, then that takes care of a lot of premium concerns, it takes care of a lot of claim concerns, and then, just spills over into that. But I think there's a lot of applicability yet that we have yet to take advantage of.
Remember the movie Back to the Future? All that stuff's coming true. Unfortunately, all the stuff from the Terminator movie, I think, is also coming true 30 years later.
My favorite show was Knight Rider. So today we can talk to our watches, and we can talk to our cars. It only took 40 years.
Yeah, it took 40 years. It's absolutely frightening. It's frightening on some level too. Let's talk some litigation specifics.
Sure.
We've all been forced into Zoom world or WebEx world or Teams world, whatever you want, go-to meeting world. It's probably saved my career because, without it, the last year would have been very difficult. Well, what are you hearing out there of people's experiences with using Zoom, as part of the litigation process? And does some of this stick going forward? Because I have my thoughts about this, but I'd like to hear what you think about it.
Yeah, no, I talk to a lot of lawyers and judges and other folks on a pretty routine basis, and it's a mixed bag, but it depends on what function you're talking about, right? So what I will tell you is that without a doubt, certain depots like will probably always do via Zoom, like
Yeah.
especially if they're if they're sort of peripheral depots and they're not critical mission critical ones. I think frankly 90% of hearings can be adjudicated via Zoom because then it's right very factual based, very law based. It's just the lawyers and the judge. There's no emotion, meant to be, in connotation there. And so it should just be a conversation about, is this correct or procedural, or is that correct procedurally, and make a decision, judge, and go on. Plus, not to even factor in all the time savings and the cost savings, right, of having to fly across the country for that same stupid hearing to get the same, similar type results you can get if you're, just via Zoom. That being said, my criminal lawyer buddies tell me that they're having a real hard time because people that are sitting in their pajamas as jurors at home are convicting the heck out of you. Wow. There's no emotional connection to that defendant. Yeah. And so they're just like, oh, yep, he's guilty, done. See you, bye.
Yeah, that's it's difficult. I think where a lot of this is going to stick, like you said, it eliminates a lot of time and travel for some of the basic things, particularly maybe some basic depositions. Attorneys tell me that they love to do the court hearings by Zoom because it's like, otherwise I'm sitting an hour in traffic. I'm doing my job for an hour and another hour back in. It's a 3-hour process for something that takes, 30 minutes, and it's created a lot of efficiencies. And I think a lot of the judges are okay with it. I think some of the Zoom trials, and from what I'm hearing, have been somewhat disastrous because you're right. Even in civil litigation too, the guy sitting in his boxer shorts and wife beater tank top with beer stains, shoving a hot pocket into his mouth. How can that person really be paying attention to what's going on? And then again, it's like I would say in civil litigation too, there is a human connection there as well. And I think that it's I'm not sure that part of it's going to stick. I think the court system's going to figure. I mean, hey, I was on an airplane last week, Tim. 225 people shoulder to shoulder wearing masks on a 5-hour. You're telling me you can't do that in a courtroom, right? I mean, yeah. So, oh wow. All right, this has been great stuff. Let's wrap up with a topic that I see is going to be highly controversial in the next 6 months. Is as places start to open back up, what are employers going to do with commutes versus work from home? Is there going to be some hybrid model going on? I think for some people and industries, the work from home thing's been fantastic. I think for some people in industries, it's been a disaster. Going forward, where do you see that going? Because again, like with anything else, technology can create some great things, but it also creates a new set of problems.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a real mixed bag too. It hasn't been talked about a lot, but it's interesting when I talk to folks. And so I've talked to companies there's a company here in San Antonio that they've had 100% of their workforce back in the office since May 11th of last year. 100%.
Wow.
The only thing they did was they have a dining room because they got about 2,000 people on campus. And so they brought a food truck into the ricochet out front and basically created another little dining area. And they've set up a couple little sandwich stations in other places of their building to spread people out around the food piece. But they've been 100% back since May 11th. Talked to a company in Indiana, same thing. They've been back since like middle of April last year. Talked to a California-based company, which I thought was really interesting. They've actually been back already since December. And so I think everybody's approaching it a little differently. The main concern I've heard, and obviously it varies depending on the type of company, but if you have a very young workforce, then there is a real training, mentoring aspect that, is very much better facilitated in an office environment. But yeah, I mean, we experienced the exact same thing. So in March, when our son was sent home from school, and my wife was kicked out of the office too for a little bit. So she took over my office. So I took over the dining room table, but then my son was there at the dining room table with me. So it was a train wreck for me to try to get anything done, right, with him right there. But now that he's back in school, in real school, in person, and my wife goes back to the office, I mean, I've got the entire house to myself, and I've got an office too in town, but I can work from the house just as easily. So I think everybody's going to, that work-life balance is going to be a little different for everybody depending on their situation. And it'll be interesting to see kind of what culturally companies choose to do with that going forward.
Yeah, because I think we're going down this rabbit hole of, okay, we've created this, this easier way to work. We've taken out a lot of, some would argue, unnecessary, travel time, commute time, but things like leadership, camaraderie, supervision, training, mentoring, I think, does that suffer going forward? I don't know the answers to these questions, but I know, like, for example, a lot of law firms, I think, are going to probably adopt some hybrid model to where, most of the administration staff can work from home. And it makes you wonder how it's going to impact the litigation process as a whole. I don't know.
I mean, I think, it remains to be seen, but I think a lot of folks, between the fact that the offices have been empty, they're looking at real estate downsizing, what that cost is of that, overhead, Class A office space, top floor, that some law firms have had forever, or, downtown Houston or downtown Orlando, that's super expensive. Do we need 15 floors of lawyers, all there together, or can we do it all, or some of it virtually, right? I mean, I remember, it's been interesting to see the evolution. I mean, AIG, when I go visit them in New York, used to have 3 buildings in Manhattan. Then they went to 2 buildings in Manhattan, and they went to 1 building in Manhattan, and they had 2 buildings in Jersey City. That's exactly right. And then they decided to go to hoteling, where now you would come into the office 1 or 2 days a week, right? But it was more of just a little, posted thing where you could sit down and plug into, as opposed to everybody having their own office space and whatnot. So it's been a trend that's been continuing for a while, but yeah, we definitely saw a whole different level of it in the last 13, 14 months.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Tim, great having you on the podcast again, as usual. Keep us updated on how technology is going to be impacting the claims process going forward. I'm sure we'll have you on again for updates as things go on, and best wishes to you. Stay safe out there. But again, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom on this important topic.
No, appreciate you, Bill. And obviously always a big fan of yours and Courtroom Sciences. You guys do an incredible job. So keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. And to our audience members, thank you so much again for participating in the Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences. I'm Bill Kanasky. We will see you next time.